This video is going to be a bit different as I'm tackling it with my friend ASN.
Hello! You may remember me from previous videos where I helped with voice acting. I also screamed that one time.
She'll jump in and talk more about the gameplay in depth, as she's played these games more than I have. I haven't played the original PC release as much.
Yeah, you could consider me a bit of a popfologist.
So, let's start with Nihon Falcom Corporation. Founded in 1981, the founder, Masayuki Kato, was a big Star Wars fan and named his company after the Millennium Falcon, which I kinda respect. But added an M at the end because they wanted to focus on computer entertainment. They're credited as some of the earliest developers of action and JRPGs. Their main focus was the popular PC-88 home computer. They would go on to make beloved franchises like Dragon Slayer, Legend of Heroes, and Ys. They were making amazing and beloved fantasy games one after another. One of their later releases is the focus of today's video, Popful Mail. Jun Nagashima was a programmer that had recently been hired. During an interview, his co-worker Koji Yokuta told Time Extension he was making his own game and the design was refined. I think how Popful Mail started was that everyone had a look and said, oh, this is quite well made. Back then, how projects were launched, it was not like there was a designated planner who came up with a proposal. If someone made something interesting, that would be presented to the president and he'd say, oh, this is interesting, maybe we can form a project. And that's how projects were started. So it was quite a free environment. There were no sales or marketing plans. If the president liked it, then we'd make game announcements to the media, saying the company is going to develop this kind of game. The game would release in December 1991, fairly late into the computer's lifespan, but the company had actually published some slightly unfinished copies of the game before it was fully finished. It was sort of a weird practice of the time, and release dates were often vague. Consumers would have to reach out to the company and ask for a finished copy of the game if they ran into any glitches. The game originally had a few different names, one of the earliest names being Scarlet Maid, but some team members felt that it was too hard to remember. A PR worker came up with Popful, or Popuru as it's written in Japanese, and the protagonist's name was Mail, so they just combined the two and the name stuck. Starting up the PC-88 release of Popful Mail, we get a text scroll explaining the distant past of the world, about how people had to stand up and fight against the evil demon gods until only 3 warriors were left standing. This story is called The Arrival of Heroes. The demon gods were sealed away beyond time itself. We jump into current day. Mail has taken a bounty to protect a gem, and the villain Nutscracker and his marionette gang is running away with it. After catching up with them, the marionette dolls drop their heads and explode, leading to this iconic shot of Mail. Then Nutscracker taunts her by chopping off his head and then it explodes. Turns out this was a fake bomb head he had created. She figures, at least it might be worth something. Sadly, it's not worth anything. Many have tried. Mail is out of luck, a bounty hunter in need of some serious cash, so she asks the shopkeeper if he has any pointers. They tell her about the mage named Material, who's at large. The reward price is 2 million gold, so Mail happily accepts it and begins her journey. This game is a 2D action RPG with some basic platforming.
It's also quite the heavyweight for the hardware, with some incredible looking characters, environments, and CGs depicting the story, making full use out of the mere 8 colors they could have on screen at a time. We even get little details like how all the characters have a little animation for when they fall from a tall height. There's even differing sprites depending on the direction your character is facing, which is incredible to see when so few games at the time would bother doing that. The gameplay doesn't disappoint either. Popful Mail is a wonderful example of bump combat done well, allowing for fast-paced and dynamic ways to attack enemies in a very easy-to-understand manner. Just ram into those suckers to deal damage. The first enemy we see manages to teach us just how to take advantage of the combat system real well by blocking head-on attacks. With a quick jump over them, they become confused, where you can start wailing on them. You also very quickly gain access to projectile-based weapons for our cast, and even some slashing-based weapons later on into the journey, but that bump combat always remains at the base of the game. There's way more depth to this stuff than most people give it credit for.
One of our first encounters in the story is with Blackie, an elf who ran away from his home village to go to the big city. He wants to live the good life, but he can't even get out of the woods safely because there are monsters everywhere, so he asks for your help. We go to his village and let the guards know where he's at. We also learn that a young mage came through earlier. He was looking for Material, and further ahead we meet that same mage in a red cloak. He's having a hard time dealing with the bad guys up ahead, so we take care of him for him. He tells us his name is Tato, a mage in training whose mentor, Material, suddenly turned evil. He wants to find his master and talk some sense into him. People used to love Material, material, and Tato can't figure out why he suddenly turned to evil. So onwards we go to the big tree tower. I gotta mention that the music is amazing. Falcom's sound team is killing it, making this computer sing. It adds so much to the vibes and colors of the world. After getting through the big tree tower, we fight the wood golem. After a simple but fun boss fight, we find Material hiding within a tree. He is surprised to hear that we met Tato, but exclaims that a student should never lecture their mentor. He laughs, saying Tato is cooling his head in prison now. Mel doesn't care about that though, she just wants a bounty on his head. He taunts her and tells her to just try and get him, before vanishing. We then find Tato who's been locked in, so we help him out and he joins us on our adventure. And that's the basic cycle of the game. There are 5 worlds, each with cutscenes before and after it. The game has a wonderful tone, a nice mix of comedy and seriousness that's just a joy to experience. Tato explains that Material probably retreated to the ancient wind cave, and we quickly find him, though a booming deep voice calls from beyond, saying that it had witnessed Material's failure, and that he must be punished for it, and he's sent somewhere else. We have no idea who this voice is just yet, but it's obvious that it's gotta be the real big bad. This cave has a bunch of creatures simply referred to as monsters, or kaiju. We also meet Blackie again, who's a complete idiot and uses bombs inside the cave to get further ahead, and instead gets himself caved in and begs for our help. This guy is such a doofus, I love him though. After getting him out, we find Gaw, a beautiful little round boy who just doesn't quite trust us yet. We learn that Material was trying to awaken an ancient monster called Golitis, but they managed to stop him and they're keeping him somewhere. We can't get to him just yet. And then Blackie, the amazing, stupid, beautiful man that he is, wakes up Golitis using his bombs. Gaw is pissed off, but he says that if we can slay Golitis, Gaw will join us in our adventures, and so we do. And after that, we get Material and return to the city to claim our bounty, but there's no one there. It's desolate, and it seems the city was attacked. Material finds this quite funny, as his boss is clearly behind this. Tato asks if it could be the demon god, to which Material exclaims, "As expected of my student, you're correct." Tato then tells Mail the story of the hero's arrival, proving the story was indeed true all this time. Material has broken the seal to bring the demon gods back, and so we have to set off on a quest to stop them. Tato is surprised that Mail wants to help, but she exclaims that the demons are bound to have some gold. Though I think she's just saying that to save face. I mean, she realizes that this is important, and this has to be done. And she also has the story arc of thinking less about money and more about what's the right thing to do. They lock Material away and use a magic seal so he can't escape, and off they go. From this point, you can swap between all 3 main characters in the game.
Mail's strong suit is at one-on-one combat. She may get a few projectiles and the knife and the boomerang, but compared to her later swords, they deal some rather paltry damage. Play as her if you want to take out individual enemies in a quick and snappy fashion. Tato specializes in ranged combat with different types of magic canes at his disposal. Gao sports the most raw power of the group, and can be pretty versatile in his own right as he has both close-ranged and long-ranged options at his disposal. He can even jump higher than Mail or Tato, which can help for platforming and for dodging enemy attacks. So, what keeps him from being the de facto character to play in most situations? He's the one character who has access to slashing weapons. They tend to do more damage per hit than Mail's swords, but because they play in animation, you have to wait for a split second between hits. And his bump damage isn't all that great. So Gao finds his best use for foes that you can't just wail on. His projectiles also don't quite reach the same area of effectiveness as Tato's, so it doesn't quite eclipse Tato either. This makes for a superb balance that genuinely feels impressive to me. Of course, there are some annoying things to mention when it comes to the game. Like, you have to go pretty far from the center of the screen for the camera to start scrolling. This isn't the worst, given the bump combat makes running into enemies not that big a deal. And super complex platforming isn't the focus of the game, but it's still worth noting. It's good to know the save system is incredibly generous, allowing you to save just about anywhere, except for boss fights, which lets you easily undo mistakes as long as you're saving regularly. There's even an autosave option in the menus that saves upon entering or exiting a level, so you never have to worry about being set back too far.
I think the game has aged pretty well, all things considered, especially since the game was released on such old hardware even for its time. But this game is really pushing its limits. It's not the easiest to get into today, considering how slow the frame rate is and the screen scrolling and all that, but I think it's more than worth it if you're willing to put up with it. The next year, the more powerful PC-98 received a port of the game. They got a new artist to make cover art, and it's not nearly as cool as the older one. I don't even know what's supposed to be happening here. Are the Tanuki, like, helping her get dressed? Are they they undressing her? Are they stealing? Like, what's going on? I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't go nearly as hard as the original cover, but whatever. This version has much more space to play around with colors, as it can output 16 as opposed to the 8 that the previous computer could. It has higher resolution too.
I'd say the in-game graphics are updated fairly well, being incredibly faithful to the original. Though, admittedly, it doesn't really feel like the game takes much advantage of the increased color palette. Doesn't mean it looks bad at all, but this version isn't quite the hardware pusher seen previously. I also like the color usage a lot more in the PC-88 version, where it uses more varied and vibrant colors a lot of the time, with some very clever usage of dithering to make up for the technical lack of colors on the computer.
I find that a lot of the characters' expressions were better in the original version, and there are some background details that are less interesting in this one. The new artwork for the cutscenes are done by new artists, but it tends to clash with the old art style, because they go back and forth between these different styles. Another downgrade is the retelling of the hero's arrival. In the PC-88 one, we have these gorgeous line art drawings. One after another shows up and gives us glimpses of the past. In the PC-98 version, there's literally only this one drawing, and this elf lady here has like the weirdest proportions, like it just looks very off compared to all the other art in the game, and that's all you get for the hero's arrival. It's kind of boring. Though, this is the first version where we get to see the shopkeeper Mel meets during the beginning that isn't an old man, but the iconic one-eyed Jack that we'll see in every subsequent release of the game.
When it comes to gameplay, there isn't too much different in terms of how it controls. There is some new control options that allow you to use the arrow keys and Z and X keys instead of the number pad, spacebar, and shift keys respectively. But as for the feel of the controls themselves, they're practically one-to-one. The real major difference I picked up on is that Gao is majorly overpowered in this version. His claw weapon just deals way more damage on the regular. This seemingly insignificant change throws out the balance way hard once you get it. All of a sudden there isn't much reason to play as male, or even use Gao's final weapon. I can't say it makes the game less fun to play. In fact, I could even see an appeal to this busted attack, but overall I way prefer a good character balance. I should also add that in spite of most of the game having the exact same level design, the volcanic zone actually received a major overhaul between versions. It seems much flatter in the PC-98 version. It also gets rid of some neat details like the ornate staircase or the ruins in the dwarven town. And of course, it introduces my biggest pet peeve with this version: these stupid retracting platforms. These are only around in like 3 areas within the entire game, but they're so annoying to deal with. Man, am I glad that you could just abuse the save system during this part, just saving when you get to one platform and then just trying again. Let's just change the subject to something better.
The music sounds excellent in this game as always. While the soundtrack is basically the same as before, it does add a brand new music track for the end of the game called The Last Stage, an eerie and atmospheric track that makes you want to look back at the journey you've just had before taking your final steps. This is a good version of the game, and I can understand why some people would prefer it. It's got its strength over the PC-88 version, but as far as I'm concerned, the original game is still the better one as a whole. Through a joint venture with Sega, we got Sega Falcom, and they had announced several games that were to be released for the Mega CD, though they only ended up making one Mega CD game, as well as some Mega Drive games. That one Mega CD game was planned to be a retooling of Popful Mail called Sister Sonic, a Sonic spin-off featuring a girl hedgehog going on an adventure. When Falcom's fans heard this, they were outraged. Everyone wanted them to instead just make a port of the original game, and thanks to that, Popful Mail released on April 1994 on a Mega CD. This version is probably more familiar to most people outside of Japan watching this. The first thing you'll notice is that this game has proper CD cutscenes with voice acting and all. It feels so much bigger thanks to that. The cutscenes look good, the animation is fluid, the voice acting is fun, and it really adds a lot to the story. The one interesting addition is the new character Kazir, who wasn't present in any other version. He's an evil sorcerer who works for the Geist Wraith, the main antagonist. I didn't feel like his addition was really necessary or did a whole lot, but I don't know, he's kinda cool, I guess.
Right away, the game takes a very different approach to combat, going for a much more traditional approach, with a dedicated attack button becoming the basis for it all. You're restricted to just attacking left and right, while standing and jumping, with no way of directly aiming up and down. This change is going to impact almost everything about the gameplay, as this heavily simplifies what we had before. Let's compare to the very first combat scenario to illustrate this. Unlike the PC original's encouragement to play around with how you handle combat, you kinda just stop to swing your sword for a bit, and then you continue on when you get more projectiles. Most of them tend to allow you to influence the direction they go a bit, which is nice, but it never quite replicates the level of dynamism seen previously. It's still fun. In fact, I'd say the boomerang in particular got a massive upgrade from this approach, it being one of the few times where it really feels like you could do so much more with a weapon than before. It's just that it makes for a much different experience, one that typically feels more stop and go. A big part of that is the arms meter in this version. It applies to every projectile weapon in the game, and even any weapon with some kind of special properties. On paper, I think it's an understandable change. It keeps the player from lobbing around attacks relentlessly, getting them to better aim their attacks. But the arms meter takes forever to recharge. So when it runs out and you're in the middle of a fight, well, you're just kind of going to have to stand around until you feel it's recharged enough. The recharge cooldown starts up again if you use your weapon at all, including weapons that don't use the arms meter. This also isn't helped by enemies getting invincibility frames, making it so you just have some time where you can't really attack. I've been focusing a lot on the negatives of the combat system so far. And these are all things I do think are worth pointing out. But this is to show that just because it's more of a conventional combat structure, doesn't mean it's better in every way. There's still plenty of good stuff to go around. This is a fun game, I swear. I could probably say this about every version, but still, the boss fights are a real highlight here. Really showing the combat system at its best, trying to get your shot in just right and all that. I also just feel the game generally feels nice to control. You have a good sense of weightiness to your movement, especially when you jump. My gosh, when we get over to Iceberg, you can maintain your momentum so well with this stuff. You could just run and jump through a screen in a matter of seconds. Oh. The not ideal scrolling position from the original games wasn't something I'd expect to show up here. It plays a bit worse in this version because without the bump combat system, you're just gonna get hit if you run into an enemy you didn't see. But once again, saving frequently is very much recommended.
Saving is slightly retooled, although you can still save any time. When you reload, it will plop you where you entered the screen from, though you can still use this to your advantage if you need to go back to the beginning of a screen quickly. You even get the option to switch out characters mid-battle. This allows you to basically play with up to 3 health bars, and you get to play around with all the weapons at your disposal without limitations.
Speaking of using all 3 characters in tandem, I want to talk about how well the character balance of the original is adapted, despite how much has changed. Maya once again starts off mainly close combat based, but she gets some pretty powerful projectiles to work with this time around. Even her final sword gets a projectile this time. With this new approach, she generally has weaker attacks than Tato and Gao, but they make up for this with their travel speed. Yeah, all the characters move at different speeds now, and Mayle's the fastest of the 3, so she's generally best for getting around levels quickly and picking off small fry. Tato's now completely projectile based with the removal of the bump combat, but he's not really missing out on much. Projectiles have always been his bread and butter anyway. For most of the game, he gets the highest damaging projectiles. And even when Gao does overthrow him in that aspect, Tato's range of effectiveness is much larger. His movement speed is also a nice middle ground between the other 2 characters. Gao, as always, is still the heavy hitter of the group, but now he moves the slowest out of the trio. This makes him particularly specialized for boss fights, especially after he gets some of his later long-range attacks. He also retains his higher jump from before, so he still has some time to shine in the main sections of the levels. The new level designs tend to go for different focuses, such as having more labyrinthian sections in the caves, or upping the emphasis on platforming in the volcanic mines. I think this is to try and aid the general variety of the gameplay, as the combat isn't quite able to carry it nearly as much. In fact, we even see many new or heavily retooled enemies to help vary the way combat is approached. They even do some nice stuff to help streamline some of the quest lines, mainly the ones having to do with backtracking.
I gotta bring up the music again, as it's still absolutely stellar. Interestingly enough, they chose not to use Redbook audio and instead let the Mega Drive's sound chip do its thing. The Yamaha chip it uses is actually a close relative to the PC-88 and PC-98 sound chips, which makes for a smooth conversion from the PC to console. Another bonus of this decision is that the voice acting can be dedicated to the CD audio and played at any moment, as the game's stage music won't interfere with that, so they didn't have to come up with any tricks to make the music and voices play at the same time. I will say though, due to the larger sprites, things feel zoomed in, and I feel like it can often be harder to deal with incoming attacks, especially from bosses. I gotta give a shout out to Golaida's new boss arena. This beautiful scenic background makes for a cool place to have a boss fight, even if the fight itself isn't anything special. It's often hard to see his attacks coming because again, it's very zoomed in. Something that definitely was downgraded is the map screen. Before it felt rich and detailed, detailed. Now it looks honestly pretty ugly, but oh well, it's not the biggest deal, I get that, it's kinda nitpicky. I gotta commend them for voicing so much of the dialogue. Even within the stages themselves, you'll have these little portraits pop up and mouth along to spoken text. It looks great, even though I feel like sometimes the chibi-fied expressions look kinda off-putting or like off-model, just a little ugly, but whatever. It's still a good effort. There's some nice presentation flares, such as cute idle animations, or ledge balancing animations. It's a good version of the game all in all. Not my favorite, but it certainly has its own charm.
It's a very nice example of adaptation, since it manages to achieve a design that captures the spirit of the original games in a much more conventional manner.
Later in the same year, on June 10th, Falcom themselves made a new version of Popful Mail for the Super Famicom, which was also their first ever Super Nintendo game, and it was advertised as such. It was kind of a big deal. Jun Nagashima, the original programmer for Popful Mail, returned to work on this project. He wanted to make their first Super Famicom game something familiar, which is funny considering that this version is basically the most different from any other, introducing new characters and vastly altered layouts. The combat, while similar to the Mega CD version, also feels a touch closer to the original PC iteration, with all the directions you can swing your sword. I love how you can crouch and like kind of crawl around, like look at me crawling by the cat, it's a male's cat now, fuck you. You can also attack while you're down, which looks funny. You can stab downwards, which adds a lot of options to how you approach combat. Just like the PC original, head-on attacks aren't always the best option, encouraging players to use alternate methods like the downwards jumping attack or the crouch attack. It's nice to see, since the Mega CD version removed some of those layers to the combat. We actually see Tato in the town before the jungle. He's also searching for material after all. First we need to get a monster card, and then we can head out to the overworld map, which is now rendered in mode 7, and I think it looks great.
Once Mail gets her hands on a shield, she gets her own dedicated block button, which is neat, but you won't get as much use from it as you'd want to because you still have to go far from the center of the screen for the camera to start scrolling. 4 versions in, and this is still a prevalent issue. Honestly, I find it more effective to be attacking while moving to circumvent this issue.
Jumping in general is really fast. You drop down like a rock, there's no momentum to it, so it looks kinda silly. It looks worse than it feels, but it still feels kinda mediocre, which is a shame considering that there's a lot of extra platform emphasis in this version of the game. This is an area of the game where your enjoyment may vary a lot depending on your taste. While I found the platforming to be very boring and stiff, Edison actually enjoyed it a fair bit, feeling that it added some nice variation to the gameplay and level design.
Mail's the general close combat option like before, but this time she goes all in, foregoing any kind of ranged options. She's also the only character in the game who upgrades their stats by simply buying new equipment in this version, with Tato and Ga having their upgrades scattered through the levels themselves. Tato covers projectile usage, as expected, though he can find all of his canes within the ancient caves. This is to allow the player to experiment with the different types of attacks he's capable of in a way that doesn't obsolete the other canes because of lower damage output. But if he gets them so early, how does he handle tougher enemies later in the game? Well, through the upgrades I mentioned previously. Do keep in mind what they look like, because only Tato can pick them up, and the game will absolutely let you go into pretty tough areas without these. Before I move on, I should bring up the NP meter in this game since Tato will be using it the most. Thankfully, I can say there's way less of a cooldown this time around, so you won't be waiting around nearly as much when you use projectiles a lot. On top of everything else, he also has the shortest jump of the trio, just as another balancing measure. Now, things are sounding pretty fine so far, but I'm sad to say where the ball's really dropped is with Ga. I just do not like how Ga controls in this version at all. He can jump high, as per usual, but the arc is so heavy. It feels like he can hardly make any distance with his jumps, which is so weird when other versions actively try to make Ga feel more floaty. His attacks also stop him in place, but this just feels bad. It's such a shame because it genuinely makes me not want to play as Ga in this game. And that's just a straight up crime. Look at him! This version of the game has checkpoints. You no longer get set back to your last save when you die. In fact, saving is heavily de-emphasized in this version, going from something that you had the option to do almost whenever you wanted to something that you could only do at shops. However, it's still heavily recommended to save whenever you get the option to. This is because boss battles don't let you leave until you beat them. This means you could enter a fight completely unprepared, whether you don't have the latest armor, or weapons, or level ups, or even have enough healing items. And because the checkpoint for the fights are right when they start, you have no choice but to reset the game to take care of any of that stuff. You also have the fact that you can't switch characters mid-fight, which, hey, the original game does as well, and I think it makes for some pretty cool strategizing of who to pick for a fight. But the difference there is that you can leave and pick someone else if your plan didn't work out. Here, if you realize someone else is better suited for the fight, again, you just have to reset the game and start from your last save.
I'm not really a big fan of how the characters look in this version. The sprites feel sort of oddly proportioned, kind of stubby, and I feel like some characters don't mesh well with others, especially with how the eyes or heads are rendered sometimes. And when they move, especially Tato, it just looks kind of wonky and jerky. The animations feel like they'd look better with smaller sprites. Having larger and more detailed sprites with more limited movement frames just doesn't mesh as well. There are a lot of really neat animations though, especially for the more comedic cutscenes and such. The cutscenes are all told through these in-game scenes. There aren't really any cool illustrations covering the whole screen, at least not until the very end of the game. That being said though, it still works well, even if I don't find it quite as appealing as other versions' story. A fun change is how the characters all have multiple expressions depending on their health status, which I really like. The music just sounds great. I'd expect nothing less for the Super Nintendo sound chip. They did a great job converting the songs. And like I mentioned before, there's some new characters here, like Meryl, the granddaughter of Material, who's this sort of self-proclaimed girlfriend of Tato, or this underwater guy, a wise old kaiju who likes spending most of his time in various waterways. The game is surprisingly short. It can be beaten in like less than 3 hours without really rushing it. So it's like half the length of other versions of the game. It takes like 14-15 minutes to get to the second area of the game, the Ancient Caves. This is probably my least favorite rendition from a visual standpoint. And in general, the beginning of the game just feels like it's speedrunning its story compared to other versions. There's no opening cutscene with Nutcracker, it just kind of throws you into the world, and you're talking to One-Eye Jack immediately, who's been renamed to Busso in this game. There's some really funny animation, and it still feels like Popful Mail, but man, it just doesn't hit the same. I didn't really find the level design or combat particularly fun, and I just kind of wanted to rush through it. They also replaced the mines with a new area called the Ancient Temple. They make characters like Namo and Rip and Rap more important, while removing others like Zaymar, and also removing a lot of Blackie's scenes. It's interesting. If you've played other versions, I still think it's worth it, but I wouldn't really recommend this one as anyone's first experience. While the game reviewed decently, many felt that it was fairly flawed. It might be a bit janky, but it's still an interesting version of the game, and I'm glad it exists.
It's clear that the developers were trying to experiment with some neat concepts to truly make a Popful Mail experience built for the ground up for consoles. I really do think it could have been my favorite version if it weren't for some of the flaws holding it back. Actually, no, this game has Baby Go in it. That means it's objectively the best game of all time!
Just a few months later, on August 12th, 1994, PC Engine CD got my favorite version of the game. It's wild to imagine 3 totally different versions of the same game being released on the same year. This really was the year of mail, huh? It was developed by Unix, a development studio crafted from NEC, the PC Engine creators, and Human Entertainment, the people who made Clock Tower. Starting the game, we get a brand new cutscene showing events that take place before any of the other versions. We start with an establishing shot of a city, and we see Francois Jewelers. This game is fully animated just like the Mega CD game, and surprisingly, it has a whole new voice cast. Inside, the shop owner is telling Mail about his family heirloom, the Tear of Airmill. This gem was passed down from his mother, and he was told by the villain Nutcracker that it will be stolen soon, so he's asking Mail for its protection, stating that Nutcracker also has a bounty on him, so he'll pay for that too. Mail says that she wants her payment to be the jewel itself, and then it gets taken from right under their noses. He pleads with her to pursue, but she says she'll only do it if she gets all the gems in his store, and he reluctantly agrees. And then we go on to the title screen, probably my favorite of all the title screens, such a chill song too. Then onwards to where the PC and Mega CD games begin. Mail chasing Nutcracker, getting blown up and finding her way to the city, meeting One-Eye Jack and finding out about the bounty for material. She does this cool thing where in the transition to the gameplay, she grabs the paper with a bounty on it and rips it off the wall, simultaneously ripping the scene away and sending us to the overworld map. And this overworld map really is a good one-to-one recreation of the original one, but with more detail and colors, of course. This game goes back to the bump combat of the PC originals, and the way it looks is close to that too. It just feels like the ultimate version of the PC game. Full-on 60 FPS with amazing colors where everything just pops. It's vibrant and beautiful. After all, the system can output more than 400 colors at a time, and they made good use of it. The website Time Extension claimed that the graphics are a downgrade from the PC98 release. I cannot fathom how they've reached such a conclusion. So I'll show you some examples here. I really can't understand why anyone would say that the PC Engine CD version looks worse, especially since it plays so much smoother. It does actually have a lower vertical resolution, but the PC Engine is a lot more powerful, and man, those colors, I love how it looks. This game also has my favorite art style for the cutscenes. Everything is just so full of life. The backgrounds are so detailed, and the character designs go so hard. Studio Max, with animation director Yurihisa Uchida, worked on this. They worked on several pieces of Gundam media. Another fun correlation is that the PC88 illustrator, Hiroyuki Nishimura, would go on to work on Gundam The Origin, one of the best Gundam series. Anyway, side tangent aside, this studio was already incredibly experienced, and they just made the cutscenes look spectacular. It was well directed and just so enjoyable. We also sometimes get these beautiful character portraits pop up in specific scenes, which really adds a lot to those moments.
The level design itself is almost one-to-one with the PC98 version, replicating a very similar feel. This does also include the PC98 redesign of the volcanic mines. Though all the chests are missing for whatever reason, I feel it has to be some kind of oversight since the rest of the game is so faithful and it just turns some cool secret areas into useless alcoves. I'd be a bit bummed if it weren't for the fact they removed the retracting platforms, baby, let's go! I figured they'd be more bearable with smoother gameplay, but hey, I'm certainly not complaining with the removal. There's also some nice tweaks from the PC originals that are incredibly welcome. Right off the bat, you'll notice that this is the first version of the game to actually have the screen scroll when you reach the center of the screen. This right here improves the visibility of things in an incredible amount. It was never a deal breaker, but with this issue present in every other version, it's so nice to have at least one where it's just how you'd expect it to work. The cast has also seen a good amount of buffs, with a lot of their weapons being even more useful than before. Nail's boomerang is much less awkward to control. Tato's Fire Cane DX needs nowhere near the amount of space to fire all three projectiles. Gal's claw can slash downward. Tato and Gal even get brand new weapons to make up for the fact that they were short one weapon compared to Mail in the original game. I could go on for way too long talking about the various balance changes made in this version of the game, but the most important thing is that they still managed to retain the balance found in the PC88 version, especially considering how the game tends to take after the PC98 version.
It also has my favorite soundtrack, though it uses Red Book audio, which means that it fades out and then starts over again, but I can deal with that. The music sounds so spectacular. It feels so full of life and complete. And it's got new tracks too, because this game features 3 new worlds where the gang gets split up. I really like it, as it gives the characters more time to shine independently, and their reunion is so satisfying. And these worlds expand the lore, add new characters, and work themselves into the rest of the plot in a way that makes everything feel more meaningful. This version lets us meet the demon gods properly before the final battles, giving the end of the game a lot more build-up. It feels so much more narratively satisfying, and the new worlds have amazing music and some of the best boss fights this entire franchise has to offer, and it doesn't bog down the pace. It feels like a welcome addition. There's also a small bonus track in this game that features a warning if you attempt to play this game disc on a CD player. Mail, Tato, and Gao have a full minute-long conversation about how it'll damage your speakers. It's super cute, and it was translated by River Pudding. I'll link it below. It's well worth a watch. 2 small details I love is that 1, this game is the only one that has swimming animations, and in all 4 main directions too. And 2, every boss has a voiced pre and post fight scene piece of dialogue, which is super cool. This game utilizes the arcade card, but it's not necessary to play it. The only difference is that cutscenes will load faster, and without the arcade card, it'll take a second for the shop owners to say their line.
One final, major change is that they revamp how the endgame works. I won't get too into detail to avoid spoilers, but during the 3 final bosses, if you die at any point, you just restart the boss you're on, making for a massive improvement from the PC version, and even allowing for the revamp of the final boss to be much more challenging without feeling nearly as annoying. Makes that good feeling of beating the game even sweeter. There are some other nitpicks to point out, such as how sinking in water is a bit slow, especially for having a full water-based world. It also doesn't have any of the objective streamlining from the Mega CD version, which isn't bad on its own, but would be nice to have. Probably the biggest thing is that you're completely unable to skip cutscenes past the first 2. You can't really skip any of the voice segments either. I can deal with it, but I know that's going to be a hang-up for some folks. especially people who can't speak Japanese. Regardless of these valid points, it doesn't keep this version from being an incredibly polished experience. That's a wonderful time.
Of course, like other versions, playing different characters will give you different dialogue, so these games are all fairly replayable. There are also secrets to find and some fun dialogue to uncover, so they're good for more than just one playthrough, and that goes for all of these games. It really adds to their charm, but the PC Engine CD version just feels so much more satisfying as a whole, like a more complete package. It really feels like the ultimate version of the PC original games. With that being said, most people will typically say that the Mega CD version of the game is the definitive version, and while that's a perfectly fine opinion to hold, it's one we can't really help but disagree with. So we want to make some comparisons to try to show off the strengths of the PC Engine CD version and why we personally like it best. While the graphics might not be as impressive at a glance, and the Mega CD version has smoother animation and cutscenes, I still think the PC Engine CD version looks better overall, and it does more with less frames. In the PC Engine version, it's obvious that the marionette doll's head explodes, and Mail is just standing there with this funny expression. In the Mega CD one, it looks like it just puffed out some smoke. It doesn't even feel like it blew up or anything. And it doesn't look like Mail was damaged or whatever. It's like the whole framing of it is so odd. When Nutcracker's head blows up, there's this huge build-up, a massive explosion followed by in the Mega CD one, it's so quick and it feels hard to tell what's supposed to be going on. It looks more like he just shot some gas at her or something and she's like coughing at it. Also, considering how the PC Engine version has more cutscenes that are also longer, it helps make the world feel more alive. There's so much more color and the backgrounds feel so much more lively and fun. And I really appreciate this moment where they return to the town and it's completely desolate and you get a moment to sort of take it in as they're wondering what happened. While in the Mega CD one, before they even get to the town, they just say, oh look, it looks like it's been destroyed, and you don't get this funny shot of Mail kicking material and singing to herself about getting the bounty. Don't get me wrong, the Mega CD cutscenes are awesome. They have a hectic energy about them. There's a lot more frames of animation to go around, and you get all these cool shots of Mail slashing the marionette dolls that you don't get in any other version. It looks great. It's just that these two interpretations put their focus in different areas, and I prefer what the PC Engine version focused on.
Mail's also just a lot more openly greedy in the Mega CD version, actively refusing to help people until there's a promise of a reward. While in the PC Engine version, she typically tries to help people who are in danger whenever she can. Still hoping for a reward when possible, of course, but not actively willing to let people get hurt because there isn't one. She only really tries to do this bargaining when it comes to handling valuable possessions like the Tear of Earmill. I can see the argument for her Mega CD portrayal. It genuinely serves to make her character arc in the game a bit larger, but I still prefer the PC Engine portrayal of her. There's also the deal with Jacob when you're playing as Ga. On Mega CD, they seem to try to increase his relevance, but they do it by making him scared of Ga like most of the other workers there. This is such a vast contrast to the PC Engine version where he's one of the few people who are just cool with Ga. It not only feels much more refreshing, but also in character for him. And for both of these examples, just like just about everything else in the PC Engine version, it's much more faithful to the original game.
I also prefer the CD soundtrack of the PC Engine version, and while both the voice casts are awesome, I prefer the PC Engine one. The voices just feel more fitting to the characters for me, but that's just personal taste.
見つけたぞマリオネット強盗団終了ナッツクラッカー私たちも出発よ見つけたぞ50万ゴールドの賞金首マリオネット盗賊団終了ナッツクラッカーさあタット行くわよねえ君一体どうしてこんなところにいるんだいあそこが古代の洞窟だよ
こんなところで女の子に出会うなんてどうしたんです十分気をつけないと僕だって言いたくているんじゃないよパンパカパーンブラッキーくんです僕だって好きでここにいるんじゃないよさあちょっと離れて
前の知り合いとんでもないことをしてくれたガウあ俺知ってるガウこいつが言ってたガウお前の知り合いとんでもないことしてくれたガウ俺も知ってるガウこいつが言ってたガウ
さらばだまさかその愚か者がお嬢ちゃんのさらばだわしを捕まえることなど誰にもできんと思っとったんじゃこんなところまで人が来るなんて珍しいこともあるもんだ
こんなところまで人が来るなんて珍しいこともあるもんだ
もう顔洗って出直して今回ご苦労様でした 顔洗って出直してこい。ご苦労様でした。
And in terms of gameplay, I have more fun with the PC Engine release. I know some people dislike bump combat, but between the two styles, it's the one that allows for much more creative and snappy combat encounters. If you really can't stand it that much, you'll be happy to hear that you don't have to rely on it as soon as you get a little bit into the game. Your throwing knives and boomerangs are unlimited, and Tato has projectile attacks aplenty, and Gao also gets a slash type move and projectile moves too, so the bump combat is only a small part of the game. The Mega CD version also has limited ammo on throwable weapons, and a lot of weapons take a lot of time to recharge. This isn't a huge deal, but it can slow gameplay down a bit. And let's not forget the expanded cutscenes, 3 extra worlds with amazing visuals, new boss fights, new great music, new lore. The PC Engine CD version just feels more complete to me, and I'm just kinda tired of seeing people dissing the PC Engine version, often without really pointing to anything specific, and if they do, it's just like, oh, the sprites are small and has bump combat, which is more like just a flavor, you know, it's more of a preference thing than saying it's objectively bad.
This isn't to say the Mega CD version isn't worth playing because of our preference. If we were doing that, we'd just be repeating the same issue all over again. We just want to show that the PC Engine version is cool and has genuine real advantages to it.
In 1995, we received the only English localization the game has ever gotten up to this point, and it was based on the Mega CD version of the game. It was created by Working Designs, who have a somewhat mixed reputation for their creative liberties that they're known to take. Vic Ireland, who was one of the heads at the time, said, "Generally speaking, I was, or am, a proponent of PC Engine versions of games over their Mega Drive and Mega CD brethren. However, in the case of Popful Mail, the sprites were super deformed and were so small relative to the Mega CD version that it took away from my enjoyment of the game. I believe this was just evidence of a quick and dirty coding job, and it could have been every bit as good or better than the Mega CD version given the time and resources." That does not make sense to me. Kinda feels like if you were to play Super Mario Bros. And it's like, what the fuck, the sprites are so small, I can't play this! Oh, thank God, I almost thought this game was programmed poorly. I find this to be such a weird thing to say. Small sprites don't equal quick and dirty coding. I quoted this to game developer friends and they just couldn't make sense of it either. And the fact that it took away from his enjoyment of the game is surprising to me. It's a look that's accurate to the original PC release and it works well. Also, in the PC Engine CD version, you tend to have a much better feel of your surroundings. Often in the Mega CD one, I find myself not being able to see where most of the boss sprites are while running back and forth, and moves are often not well telegraphed because of that. I feel like this big sprites equals better is a thing that's very of its era. Things had to feel like they were pushing the hardware all the time, you know, that kind of thing. To be more fair to Vic though, I feel like it's easier for us to accept smaller sprites today, as a lot of indie games tend to use smaller sprites in a similar way. It's more common now that pixel art is more of an aesthetic choice and not based on a limitation.
Getting on with the game itself, let's start with some of the more positive changes. They added some nice title screen music because the Mega CD version didn't have any. It's welcoming and actually manages to fit the vibe fairly well considering that this wasn't made by any of the original composers. The intro cutscenes are reorganized a bit, with the prologue playing as the game boots and the first normal cutscene playing to select a new game. Compared to both having its own dedicated option in the Mega CD version, I think this flows a lot better. You can skip the cutscenes anyhow, so you don't need to have the option to start when the gameplay starts like the PC originals. Clouds in the Elf Forest are made to scroll on their own rather than being dependent on the camera scrolling. It's more of a neutral change, but it's neat to see. There's also now a dedicated pause button that doesn't open the menu. It doesn't seem like much, but it actually shows you how much time you spent in the game. It kinda matches the PC originals more in that regard, since you can check for that in those as well. It really could come in handy if you were trying to speedrun the game back in the day. Though I'm not sure if this is the version that you'd want to be speedrunning for a very big reason. The difficulty is brought up significantly. They've done this through a variety of ways, such as increasing the damage you take, increasing the amount of hits bosses take, raising the prices on tons of items, giving you less money for selling gold bars. Now don't get me wrong, I love hard games. The thing is, I don't think this game was designed with these kind of parameters in mind. It's not too bad at first, you still have time to come to grips with the game, but then some enemies just feel like they take way longer to take out than they should. Then you get hit by the bosses. The wood golem can deal a quarter of your health with armor. Compare this to the 10th you'd only take in the Mega CD version and you have way less room for error. Feels so much more like an endurance round. But you always have those handy dandy healing items, right? Well, yes, you do. They just cost more. So if you want to do that, welcome to grinding a lot more. It's not all super ridiculous. Sounds like, you know, only 30 or 60 more gold. Then others are hundreds more gold. making some of these items go for 1,000 plus gold, and that's for one simple reason. The items make any pretense of actual difficulty disappear, so they had to inflate the prices to keep people from doing that. At least most items sell for more to slightly compensate for this, but that's not including our friend the gold bullion. No, it's just too convenient of a money-making source. That has to be slashed in half. Let's also make the designated gold bullion grinding spot take way longer to grind from. I'm not gonna say that this makes the game bad. I still had fun. This was the first version that I played, actually, years and years ago. But with how much this accentuates the game's flaws, this was clearly done to keep people from beating the game within a rental period. Can't forget our good pal the arms meter. With having to lay down more hits, that's just more opportunities to drain it, which means even more waiting for it to recharge. I really do see the appeal for a harder difficulty. I even got some enjoyment trying to perfect the enemy patterns. But I could never recommend this for a first-time experience. Thankfully, there's a ROM hack of the game that restores the changed values back to the way they were. It even keeps some of the better changes from this version. It's part of a series of ROM hacks for other working designs games called Unworked Designs. It's really neat to see this be a thing, and I commend the work behind it. That being said, they don't change anything about the actual localization for the game.
The biggest deal is the dialogue. They changed the tone around a lot. Many people say it's for the better, as the dialogue they replaced was either boring or uninteresting or basic. I feel like that's sort of harsh to say, just kind of dismissing the original intention of the creators. A lot of the dialogue they replaced was either explaining lore or just gave us some insight into an NPC. The thing is, working designs would often include pop culture references to movies, TV shows. Hell, they made it so that Samar, instead of being a pompous prick who's high on his own fumes, he's now like a bad Arnold Schwarzenegger impression called Sven T. Uncommon, who just talks about his movies and pumping iron. It's kind of a funny idea, I guess, but man, I loved Samar as he was. He was just such a pompous dick. I wanted to punch him in the face. It was perfect. This Sven voice just gets grating so fast.
I am no kindergarten cop. The sissy man Fernandio could not teach you a lesson, so I have come to terminate you.
Originally, this character was named Count Eric. He had a really long name and he just says it super fast with no flaws. But they changed it to this.
By the way, I'm Claverding Klotznipper, Little Biffle Poopy Woof and Van Venantio, Krakenlichter Ratchetface the 14th, feudal lord of Oderberg. But you can call me Lord Venancio.
Guys, he said poopy and crotch sniffer. It's kind of like crotch sniffer. Get it? They changed Blackie to Slick, which, you know, I get that one, honestly. I think my least favorite name change was Jacob, who was changed to Glug. The demon gods were changed from Bergfried, Desarodios, and Geistwraith to Morgal, Necros, and the Overlord. The Overlord is the worst one. What a boring fucking generic name. And when it comes to the writing, so many of these jokes just pull me out of the world. They reference Euro Disneyland and the country of France, and pretty much everyone has a wacky voice or something comedic to say. I feel like that wonderful balance of serious and comedic that the original game struck is just lost here. It surprises me how many people say this is objectively better, as if jokey dialogue is inherently better than serious dialogue, but that's just a preference at the end of the day. And I just think that it's a shame the only English version of the game that we got is so tonally different from the original. That and, yeah, they say slurs in this one because that's super cool, huh? And not just one either. And they make jokes about eating disorders. I know it was a different time, but that doesn't mean you can't criticize it. There's a quality to this dub that I could see the appeal of. It's almost like listening to friends kind of riffing on the original script. I can imagine they had a lot of fun making it. I bet there are many times where someone thought of an idea that was funny and it just got the whole room laughing, you know? But at the end, I feel like the final result is just a game that's sometimes afraid of taking itself seriously. So jokes are shoehorned in all over the place, and every character has to have a goofy voice with something wacky to say. People's accents are all over the place and often just get dropped randomly. This is the only official means of experiencing this story in English, so it just feels so frustrating that the version we're stuck with is so different. It's not objectively objectively bad, and if you prefer the more comedic pop culture referencing vibe, then that's fine. But you can't deny it's harder to immerse yourself in this world, and it's such an of its era style that just hasn't aged super well, especially with the slurs. Working Designs is known for this though. Some of their translations are great, but a lot of them completely ruin the original tone, and it just bums me out. Exile is another game in the same boat. Thing is, I know localizations have to make some kind of change, but as long as the core remains intact and the overall tone is preserved, changes to the dialogue would be totally fine as long as you still get that original story told in a way that feels true to itself. Someone once wrote that if you play the English Sega CD version, you won't be missing out on anything by not playing the others. I couldn't disagree more. If you like the localized version, more power to you, but I urge you to not just dismiss all the other work Falcom did before it. I care about the original intent that the talented people who made these games had, and I think it's a shame that the original story of Popful Mail is still inaccessible to non-Japanese speakers. I don't want your takeaway to be that I think Working Designs was a net negative to gaming. I don't think so. There's a lot of games you would have never gotten if it wasn't for their work. It's thanks to their efforts that we got a lot of these experiences we wouldn't have had otherwise. They really helped popularize a lot of RPG games in the West. They were pretty important back in the day. But that doesn't mean that you can't criticize any of their efforts. I see some people say stuff like, oh, people who don't like Working Designs need to get a grip, and it's like, dude, what are we talking about here? You can have opinions on media, that's just how it is. If you feel like a localization strayed too far, you're allowed to say that. Like, come on, man.
There's not much else when it comes to the games after this. Only a modern port of the PC-88 version on Switch, the Mega CD version showing up on the Mega Drive Mini 2, and a lost mobile phone version that released episodically between 2003 and 2004. There's not much we can glean from the few screenshots we have, besides the fact that it's based on the PC-98 version. There's redrawn visuals, and the screen crunch looks absolutely miserable. Hopefully it's found one day, but obviously it's not the most ideal version of the game.
Beyond the games, we have a few other pieces of media to discuss. No Pessimist was a promotional VHS tape you could get, which showed off some beautiful animation of Mail being thrown into the real world in modern day Tokyo. Her and the main character have to deal with these Tanuki enemies and find out what threw her into this world. It's a music video style animation and it's so fun. I adore this shot of Mail looking shocked as the Tanuki come down from the escalators and they just envelop her and this other girl and they're just like, ah, we're doomed. It's so fucking funny. But I don't really like this one shot of her being surrounded by otaku who are like horned out when seeing her. It's like kind of weird. It's actually a lot more fan servicey stuff like that from around this time specifically, especially this illustration here of Mail taking a bath with these other bounty hunters while they're being spied on. It's just like, I don't know, man, it feels off-putting to me. It doesn't fit with the vibe of the actual games, especially because Meryl here is like maybe 12 years old. She's a kid and she's Material's granddaughter, and if you see there in the background, that's Material, one of the guys spying on them along with Blackie. And by the way, these two elves are Blackie's sisters. So yeah, what the fuck, guys? What kind of turbo weirdo thought this was a good idea to print? The art I'm talking about actually belongs to drama CDs, which were very popular in Japan. Many anime have fun little side stories voiced by the characters' actors. Popful Mail had several of these, and the first of which was translated by fans into English. It features Mail's voice from the Mega CD version, Megumi Hayashibara, and these two new bounty hunters, one of whom becomes a rival to Mail. They're Comb and Katyusha. The CDs seem to be set in the continuity of the Super Famicom release, utilizing characters and scenarios from that specific version of the game. It's sort of interesting hearing that world getting the cast from a different version of the game, even if Mail is the only one who reprises her role.
Though these CDs don't just have the story sequences, there's some really nice remixes on here. These songs are beautifully arranged by Tomohiko Kishimoto. And because this follows the Super Famicom canon, a lot of the Super Famicom exclusive tracks get a lot of love here. We even get vocal mixes, sung by the various VAs to wonderful effect. Stuff like Dear Friends or Stand Up are songs I listen to on a regular basis and just put me in a good mood. The drama CDs also featured a lot of art from Yu Aizaki, who has an art style that just radiates charm. This would culminate in Aizaki making a full manga for Popful Mail published by Dengeki Comics in 1996. We don't know all that much about it since it isn't all that readily available on the internet, but from what I can glean, it does carry over elements from the drama CDs given the presence of both Kom and Katyusha in it. Though until we get our hands on some scans, we can't exactly say much else about it.
The last thing I want to touch on is the mock-up translation project I've been working on for the PC Engine CD version. I might not have the skills to make patches for games and implementing them, but I decided I could at least translate a playthrough of it. So, my friend Aosint played through the game, sent me the recordings, I translated all the text, put it in this pixel art font that seemed pretty fitting to me, and for the cutscenes I used YouTube's built-in subtitles, so you gotta turn on CC when watching it. We've gone through the whole game as Mel, Tato, and Gao, as they all have unique dialogue. You can now watch and understand the whole game story from beginning to end. I'll try to find some way to supply everything as text, so if anyone has the skills or know-how to make a proper patch, they hopefully can. And please share any feedback if you got any. I also got help from my buddy Inubass. I'm not fluent in Japanese, I'm still learning, but he's lived in Japan for a long time, and it's thanks to him that I was able to do this, as he could double check stuff for me. I really appreciate that. So if you want to support him, please check out Sketchy Ceviche on Steam. He's got a neat platforming beat 'em up called El Panadero, and is coming out with a new game called El Borotero, the Space Tinkerer. He's an indie game dev from Mexico, but is based in Tokyo, and he's lived there for a while. I just wanted to give his stuff a shout out for helping me both with this project and with the Parappa subtitle project I worked on before. There were some parts that really stumped me, so I gotta give my thanks. This project has been in the works for a while, so I'm glad to finally put it out there.
If there's one thing I want people to take away from this video, it's to not take the popular consensus on something for granted. There's so much in these games that I feel are worth looking at that I think people miss out on by just parroting that everyone should play the Sega CD version and nothing else. So go ahead and give these games the decent handshake they deserve. Even if you don't come to hold the same opinions as we do on which specific version is your favorite, at least you got to try something new. Besides, no matter what version of the game you're playing, you'll still be experiencing the magical fantasy adventure of Popful Mail.
And that's all I got for you this time. Thanks for watching.